very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for carving out the time to come to this session this afternoon. And we're going to be talking to you about research-informed practice and project building. My name is Sally Elton Chalcraft, and I'm a Professor of Social Justice at the University of Cumbria. I'm also the Director of a research centre, and so we engage in research projects like the ones we're hopefully going to work on with you. I'm going to introduce the other two members of our team from One Cumbria now, and they might want to say a little bit about themselves. So Alison and Judith, if you want to just introduce yourselves and just come off mute for a moment.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'll go first. So I'm Judith Schaefer, and I'm the Director of One Cumbria Teaching School Hub. And we're very excited to be working with the University of Cumbria on trying to get some research-informed practice projects up and running. It's a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it? Research-informed practice. Anyway, we're really keen at One Cumbria to get research projects underway. There's such a lot of expertise and experience in the system, and we're really keen to build on that and do some joined-up thinking. Part of that initiative comes from Alison, who is my colleague, who is a very keen researcher and very eager to get the network of graduates from not only our ECF framework, but also from our MPQ suite involved in some of these projects as well, and working together across the piece. Alison, do you want to say a bit?
Yeah, so as I said before, when we were gathered together a bit earlier, my name's Alice Wilkinson, and the doctor bit of the title is a very recent addition, because I have just been vivaed for my PhD in educational research, which took me 7 years part-time. Now, I'm not expecting everybody to think, all right, 7 years, no problem. But the journey to the end product was the most extraordinary, thrilling and wonderful thing I've ever done. And I learned more about my craft and my profession through those 7 years of in-depth research into what was going on in my own school, actually. I just can't recommend the process highly enough, and that's something I'm very keen to share. As I said before, I am a secondary school head teacher. I actually set up a studio school in the South Lakes. Some of you may know me from that, from Queen Elizabeth Studio School. But latterly, in retirement, I've been working, not in retirement at all, but working with Judith and the team at One Cumbria, which is incredibly exciting, because there's this joining up of loads of threads and strands to make this really, really exciting whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. We'll say that a lot because we firmly believe that that's what's happening at the moment in Cumbria. But my other role is actually leading the South Lakes Federation of Schools down there, centred in the South Lake District, and also the South Lakes Rural Partnership, which is a large group of primary schools. And it's really interesting thinking about what a group of schools can do collaboratively by way of an inquiry to learn more about how to solve thorny problems or how to advance understanding about issues in schools. But I've probably said too much already, and I'll shut up and hand back to you, Sally.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Judith. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to kick us off by explaining what we're going to cover in this short hour session this afternoon, and it's particularly useful for those people who are viewing this online at another time. However, we are really pleased to see representation from some of our schools. So we've got people from Kingsmore, Seaton, Ullswater and Allithwaite with us, I think, this afternoon. And a little bit later on in the session, we would very much like to hear from you and have an interactive session. And those people who are watching this online, our email addresses are at the end of the PowerPoint, so do make a point of contacting us and asking us questions and getting involved in working with us on a research project of your choice. So the welcome, as you can see, was supposed to be from Ruth Harrison Palmer, our Director of the Institute of Education at the University of Cumbria, but Ruth has been unable to join us at this particular moment in time. So I'm doing that welcome. I'm Professor Sally Elton-Chalcraft. We're going to then go on to look at what we're able to offer you jointly, One Cumbria and the University of Cumbria. And I'm going to give a demonstration, a description of one of the projects that we have engaged with on maths, actually. But you know, you can choose to do whatever you want. This one just happened to be on maths. Then Judith and Alison are going to talk about funding for these research projects and how you can access some funding and the support that they'll be able to offer. And then we're going to end the session with hopefully a substantial amount of time for the people here this afternoon to engage in questions and answers. And we think the people that are going to look at this online might find that quite an interesting process as well. But obviously you'll be talking to us about your own project. And then, you know, how you apply and the application process. So our offer, we have professional inquiry small scale projects that we can work on with you, which are you know, to do with, say, a literature review, helping you design a small scale study, or we can do slightly longer, much more robust studies, which we would actually recommend you engaging in, and which was certainly the focus of this one that I'm going to give you an example of a maths project. And there's a more of a comprehensive interrogation of a particular research project. So this one that I'm going to describe to you this afternoon was on mastery mathematics. Some of you will be familiar with that. And it was about changing teacher beliefs around in-class grouping and mindset. And what I did was I asked some questions of one of the people who was involved in this project, Andy Ash from Our Lady of Pity Primary School in the Wirral. To answer some questions which I posed to him about this particular project, because unfortunately neither Andy nor Pete, who was involved from the University of Cumbria, were able to take part in this session, but we have got some little clips hopefully that will work, and certainly some questions and answers. So what it was a study, really, a very rigorously designed and robustly implemented research study that focused on the day-to-day experiences of teachers and particularly the needs of children. And it was based on building collaboration and trust with a shared purpose. So there were a lot of teachers involved in this. And you can look at this PowerPoint at your leisure and sort of find out the kind of things that we did. But basically, I asked Andy how the research centre, our research centre, and obviously with your projects, it will be One Cumbria and our research centre, how it was set up. And Andy said, we had a very loose idea of what we wanted, but Pete, our researcher, came and talked through different possibilities. And this helped narrow the focus. And that's a really important thing, to narrow your focus and plan a project which has real purpose and clarity. And what I always say is a project has to be doable, bounded, and precise. And if you've got a project that's doable, bounded, and precise, it's going to work and it's going to be of benefit to you, the learners, and the teachers. So the aims that Andy was working towards were that they were working with approximately 100 primary schools. So this was a huge project through their teaching school, helping them all develop a mastery approach to maths teaching, adopting the use of a textbook. Now, some of you might agree and some of you might disagree with that, but they were interrogating their practice. And they realised that there was a major shift for these schools, and they wanted to adopt a research research approach that helped better understand the change that was happening. And so they were really investigating models of change, how this intervention was working or not working. And so with guidance from the Research Centre, they developed an approach where they worked with 7 teacher researchers to understand the shift in beliefs as well as practice. So they were looking very deeply into not just what was happening, what was being taught, but what the beliefs of those teachers were that influenced, that impacted on their practice. And they video recorded teachers teaching and used stimulated video recall to capture what was happening. And the Mathematics Mindset Collaborative Project was an invitation for teachers to be involved in the introduction of the Singapore Mastery Maths that I presume many of you will know about. And it was based on the Maths No Problem textbook scheme. So in the first session, and again, we'll be talking to you about the kind of sort of organization of your own research project. So you will have your own bespoke research project. You don't, just because I'm talking about this one doesn't mean that that's the kind of format that you will need to follow. You can, Mrs. Hughes is saying your internet's struggling. Don't worry about that. Hopefully you can come back in a bit later, but this is all being recorded. So the first session was where volunteer teachers discussed their experiences and issues, and then settled on a mathematical mindset as the focus. You could settle on whatever you wanted to for your focus, and it's really an opportunity for you to talk amongst yourselves, with us, with One Cumbria, and possibly funders of this, to decide on something that is really fit for purpose for you. But in this project, they looked at a book, Mathematical Mindsets, and each of the teachers read that before they actually began the project in earnest. And so the teacher researchers generated data by making classroom video of a lesson and then being interviewed while watching and fast forwarding and pausing and so on. And the researchers were involved in thematic analysis. Now, just because they decided to do videoing doesn't mean you have to. So it's not that we're saying that that's what you have to do. It's just that that's what they decided they wanted to do. So you could do something completely different. You could just collect data through interviews, through discussions, focus groups, through little surveys, questionnaires, or something like that. And then thematic analysis, this is where the university and One Cumbria can help you. We can give you ideas on how to engage in analysis that is fit for purpose for the bespoke project that you've particularly chosen. And so it's a very much a collaborative but led by you approach to research. So I asked Andy what impact the project had on attitudes towards maths in the school, for example, on achievement for learners. And he said, well, we found that the teachers' practice had shifted. They'd made significant changes to their teaching, adopting ways of teaching maths that focused in on problem solving and creating opportunities to learn the same mathematics for all pupils. And they found that there was some evidence that the teacher's mindset had shifted so that they thought about maths being more akin to being fallible, a fallibilist approach, so you're all fallible. We all make mistakes. And this seemed to be connected to their moving away from ability grouping. Now, it's very, very involved, but it was looking at this particular idea of ability grouping, mixed ability grouping, and the benefits and drawbacks of each of those through rigorous interrogation of practice. The challenges of this particular project, Andy said, were encouraging teachers to have their lessons video recorded, and that this wouldn't lead to external judgment and negative responses. And I think teachers are very used to now being observed, but even so, having it enshrined in a video is quite scary. So as I said before, just because this group decided to video doesn't mean that you have to at all. But it's an example of where that really empowered the researchers to learn from their own practice. So I'm going to attempt to show you a little clip from this particular project. I'm hoping this may work. Can I have somebody, Alison, can you kind of say whether you can actually see the video?
Yeah, I'll stand by and see if it works. So far, nothing, but
okay. I'm just finding the right place. Right, here we go. Can you hear that?
No, there's nothing coming through. Sorry, Sally. The perils of presentations with videos, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can't hear that?
No, sorry.
Okay.
And
Not
I can see
to
people
worry.
shaking their heads, so it's not just me.
Okay. I'm really sorry. I had tried to embed it in the actual video, but did not succeed. So I'm sorry, but basically you will have this PowerPoint when you look at it at a later time. And those of you who are looking at this online, you can just play this. We're starting at 14 minutes and 30 seconds. And the teacher was feeding back to Andy. I don't know whether you actually saw the clip of Andy. Andy was you didn't see any of it. No, sorry about that. Okay. Basically, the teacher was saying that it really empowered her to learn about how to shift her understanding from thinking about teaching maths in a particular way and experimenting with that, doing this intervention with her class, reflecting on it with a group of others, and then how this practice then informed this reflective practice then informed her future teaching. So apologies that you couldn't actually see that. But you can look at that at a later date. Okay, so the final question I asked Andy was, would you recommend to other schools, multi-academy trusts, to engage in research projects such as this, and why, and what did you gain from it? And Andy said, absolutely. He felt that engaging with research projects and with our research centre at the University of Cumbria raised their understanding of what it meant to be research informed. I mean, a lot of the teachers that were involved had not really engaged in any rigorous research since they'd done their their undergraduate degree or their teacher education courses. Some of them had engaged in master's work, some had done a little bit of work, but they hadn't really engaged in something as rigorous as this. And he felt that a lot of the teachers to this day were able to now more readily cast a critical eye on so-called research-based approaches and be careful with what claims to accept. So in other words, what he's saying is, as a teacher, you kind of think if something's written in a book or if a journal article is written, you think, oh, some very clever person somewhere has written that, got it published, it must be right. Or particularly if somebody's selling you a scheme of work, this must be right then. And what we're trying to get teachers to do is to be more empowered to read research, to look at schemes of work with more of a critical eye and think, I'm not quite sure that does work, and engage in your own research to upskill yourselves so that you can be more critically aware and actually think about whether that is appropriate or not for your school, in your setting, and for other learners, and so on. And so really what Andy and this maths project are saying is there are lots of ways of engaging in research, and we're hoping that you will decide to work with us and allow us to support you in engaging in a research project that was really fit for purpose and work well in your particular context. And there are some outputs here that you can have a look at your leisure. And now I'm going to pass over to Judith and Alison to talk about, we've got a flyer that again is going to be available to you to talk about how these kind of projects can actually be funded, because there's a range of things that you can engage in, but how are you going to actually fund those? So I'll leave that slide up for you.
Thank you, Sally. So I think it's probably sensible if I talk about funding first, because I was a head teacher until the 31st of August, and if you wish as a school to pay for a research project yourself, you are of course perfectly able so to do. However, school budgets being what they are, we thought we ought to find some realistic sources of funding that you could access in order to pay for what are, you know, in terms of school budgets, expensive projects. However worthwhile they may be, they do cost money. So we've been put in touch courtesy of a colleague called Professor Sam Twistleton, who is one of One Cumbria's Board of Trustees. She's also a professor at Sheffield Hallam University, and she has put us in touch with an organisation called the Shine Foundation. Now, this was set up by a bunch of entrepreneurs in London some years ago, who were very keen to promote this kind of research project in groups of schools. For a long time they operated only in the southeast, only out of London, and then finally, like everyone else, realised eventually that there was life north of Milton Keynes, and in the north we are able to do research projects just as effectively as somewhere in the south, Bright Lights, big city, and so they moved lock, stock and barrel to Leeds. And started pumping some of their capital into projects in the north of the country. They are now moving into Cumbria, and they are very keen to spend some of their money, which is not insubstantial, in our county. At the moment they've only funded one project, but when I met with them just before half term, they're really keen to get involved in projects like this. So certainly something that a school or a group of schools might have thought was a nice to have but not affordable, might well become affordable. So they're interested in particular in starting working with groups of schools right from the very beginning. So where the University of Cumbria would set you up with an idea and help you focus and bring that to something that's actually practical and workable, upable, the Shine Foundation would also work with you right from the innovation stage all the way through the project, which could last for 2 or 3 years, and then it might even be longer than that. They're interested in follow-up projects as well. Right through to measuring the impact of what's happened. So it's a complete package from right from the very, very beginning until you're satisfied that you've reached the point at which you can show an impact of what you've been doing. They offer mostly support for teacher time, because as you will be aware, that is the thing that we don't have enough of. Releasing teachers from teaching and from classroom commitments to be able to get involved in research projects is something that takes up quite a lot of the funding. So they're very aware of that, and they are happy to factor that in, and it's a major part of the funding that they can offer. The amount of money they will spend is, I was a bit taken aback when I discovered this, but it was well into 5 figures potentially for some of those bigger projects. And the thing that struck me about the people I was talking to is how flexible they are, how aware they are of education and the needs of education and the practicalities of doing something like this on the ground. So I was really impressed. That they understood what they were taking on. They're very keen to get involved. So I'm really hoping that as a result of promoting these projects and working with Sally and Ruth, that we'll be able to get a couple off the ground in the not too distant future. And just to give you an idea of the timeline, at the moment, their next window for applications, for draft applications, I should say, is April. For a start in maybe June, or to get it approved, sorry, in June or July, to start in September. they did say that they don't want you to put a lot of time and effort into putting in a draft application which subsequently fails. So they will work with us and yourselves to make sure that the application ticks all the boxes and you don't get refused funding because the application wasn't appropriate. So, you know, they're really user friendly, and I think this is a real opportunity for once to actually be able to put these really fab ideas into practice. So that's a little bit about where we might be able to support you with funding. It's not a promise, but it is a real opportunity, and we will work with you to try and make sure that that becomes reality. And Alison is going to explain a little bit about how One Cumbria will be involved in taking those projects forward.
Yeah, hi Judith, thank you very much for that. Yeah, so One Cumbria at the moment has got considerable number of people on its programmes, from early career framework right the way through to the National Professional Qualification in Education and Leadership. We've got 150 people on 2 different cohorts this year, and they'll be joined by similar numbers over the next couple of years. And what we want to do is, as people move beyond those programs, is create networks of really engaged, research engaged, interested, qualified professionals in Cumbria working in our schools who feel able to take the lead, working with me and with University of Cumbria to actually create the support that will be needed across the piece to get these projects up and running. So we've got this potential for this sort of incredible workforce, if you like, of researcher educators in schools. So that's a real aspiration that we've got, and that will become a reality over the next 12 months. I've been thinking very much about why it's a really good opportunity and the sorts of ways that schools can think about engaging in this. And I think it is important to understand that the best way of approaching this is to be part of a family or group of schools that does this together. But you can start this as a sort of lone voice and say, this is really important to me, and we can probably use our network as it is now to create those groups and families of schools. So there's nothing wrong with saying, can I talk to you? This is really interesting for us in our school, but we need to find some partners as well. And the sorts of things that are coming up as issues in the groups of schools that I work with most closely might be the sorts of things that are resonating with some of you. So I thought it might be useful just to run through a list of the sort of issues, problems, questions that we've got in our partnerships, just to see if any of them sort of strike a note. Key issue, really important issue at the moment is transition. There's loads of work been done around transition, but I've got a group of colleagues who are just really interested in transition post-pandemic, what that means for us, because I think it's a very different thing. And also transition that's around understanding the development of the learner, the learner identity and the metacognitive skills of the learner. Very close to my heart, because that's what my study was about, but it's popping up in lots of different guises at the moment across the system. We've also got people who are talking about developing the curriculum approach to behaviour. And again, that's a post-pandemic issue, but it was there in the system before. You know, if we're going to talk like Tom Bennett does about behaviour as a curriculum, what does that mean? What are the best ways of introducing those ideas into schools? There are people asking questions about how we decolonise our curriculum. You know, what does it mean to be in Cumbria, very monoethnic? How do we create young people that are global citizens and have broader horizons? There's a novice to expert journey around leading on PSHE. That's coming out of some of the work I'm doing with schools at the moment. That might be quite an interesting thing to look at. There's a whole piece of work that we probably need to do around engaging with parents, but engaging with parents around the learning process itself and having some shared language and models of learning around that process. The democratization of metacognition is what's coming out there. And then there's another question, and this is coming out of things like the Eden Project. You know, how do we move from project-based learning into coherent curriculum? That's actually quite a challenge at the moment, particularly around sustainable education and outdoor learning. That's a big challenge, moving from projects to a universal offer. And then staying on that theme, there are quite a few schools interested in how we use our school grounds and create real outdoor environments for learning, but how does that create a knowledge-rich curriculum rather than a set of experiences? So not unrelated to the earlier one. And then a big issue for me personally is how can we use the golden threads that are running through the new professional development framework, from initial teacher training through early career framework, right the way through MPQs. How do we use those to create system-wide change and development? How do we engage with those in our schools? And the best approach, I think, is to use this to answer the big questions around problem solving. So it's taking things that look like significant challenges or barriers or things that we know we need to grapple with and engage with, and asking profound questions about those. What are they? What do we understand about them? How can we learn more about the underlying causes? How can we suggest some solutions? And what do we need to learn in order to be able to solve those problems? And if we can answer some of those questions as families of schools or groups of collaborative learners using this approach, a couple of things happen. We start to perhaps come out with some solutions to problems, and then they can be very local, they can be very contextualized, they can be very Cumbrian, because this is a very specific context and we're all working within it and understand that. But the other thing that will happen, you know, and this is what was so interesting when Sally was talking about the maths project, is you do get a toolkit, a set of transferable skills. So at the end of all this, you get this understanding of how to do a literature review. You know, where can we find this information and interrogate it properly for our schools? How do we set up inquiries? What tools can we use to answer questions? You know, what does a survey or a questionnaire help us to do? What does a set of interviews help us to do? You know, how can we use thematic analysis to get some answers or to suggest some ways forward? So we've got these transferable skills that empower us to manage our own professional development much more effectively, but also contribute to school and then system-wide improvements. So if you know, working with a group of us on this sort of inquiry-based professional learning in Cumbria is of interest, then I really hope you'll get in touch. That's me done.
Thank you, Alison. That's great. Okay, so this is the first part of our flyer that kind of outlines what Alison and Judith have been talking about. And we've also got this part of our flyer, it's a collaborative flyer, One Cumbria and University of Cumbria, that give you examples of projects, and Alison's given you a whole load more, and these are just examples. You know, it's very much, as I said earlier, a bespoke thing, and there are details at the bottom where you can make contact with us and these two different types of projects. But we're kind of thinking that most people will probably engage in the research and development projects, which are 18 months to 2 years, or could even be longer, groups of schools. But if you want to work as one school on your own, then that's absolutely fine. And these are our details, and we'd like to open it up now for you to respond. I think we've lost a few people with internet connection. It was a bit bad at the beginning, but I don't know. I think is it Nikki over there? Nikki, have you? And I think your colleague is called Nikki as well, isn't she? Have you got any comments or questions or anything that you're particularly interested in that Judith and I and Alison can answer? And my colleague Ruth Harrison Palmer has joined us as well. Ruth, maybe you can sum up at the end in a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, along the way we've had 2 projects that we've wanted to work on. Our initial idea, which I think probably was pre-COVID, We do an awful lot of work and have as a school around mental health and well-being, and it's one of our big drivers. But we also take a lot of children from our feeder nurseries and other nursery settings. So probably 2/3 of our children come from our nursery and the rest come from other nurseries. And we wanted to develop a tool that would support all early years settings to develop mental health. So a kind of audit tool, but also that offered support and examples, which is the kind of tool that we have as a primary school, but we found really hard to locate when we were looking at early years. Because at one point we did get in touch with the LA, didn't we, to see about applying for some Shine funding to do it. But it's one of those things that we've kind of had the idea but not really known where to go with it. And we've lost a bit of capacity along the way that we had as well. So that was one of our ideas that we've wanted to do for a long time. The other thing that we've been talking about, we've invested a lot in our early years with regards to COVID gaps and the issues that's created. But we're still struggling with those gaps in Key Stage 1. Obviously, we're an infant school. And one of the biggest areas is physical development, as well as social relationships and interaction. So we wanted to look at a project for outdoor play during playtimes, lunchtimes and outdoor play for our Key Stage 1 children. And we know what we want it to look like. We know kind of where we want to go with it. But it was about looking at the most effective way to deal with that and the impact of it. So those are kind of our two thoughts at the moment.
Okay. That sounds really interesting. Both of those ideas sound really interesting. Alison, Judith, do you or Ruth, do you want to make any comments about that?
One thing I would say is that the Shine Foundation priorities are early years and transition. So I think that any project that's got an early years focus is going to be looked at really favourably. And both of those ideas sound like they've got a lot of potential there, and are absolutely well focused on the issues that schools are facing at the moment. So I think that's worth a punt.
Definitely. And I'd just ask, have you got any colleagues in other schools who are interested, or would this be something that you'd just try and do within your own setting?
So that's where we've struggled, because it's so difficult at the moment to engage. We do a lot of work with other schools, but to actually engage other schools on a project because they've got the same passion about that particular area that we have is really difficult. And I think it's because people are still struggling following COVID, and everyone has their own priorities, and they're not necessarily ours.
Yeah, but I think out there, Nikki, there'll be other schools that are as interested as you in this, because I think what you've done is you've really hit a nerve, haven't you, of really current and important issues. So I think that's where we can help, because One Cumbria are this wider network, and we could possibly find you partner schools, but even if we didn't, I think you've got enough there to generate a really interesting project yourselves.
I mean, that would be fantastic. I think that's where schools we've got loads of connections, and we have the ideas. We've got those two projects, but what do we do with them? Where do we go from there? How do we develop it? So any help and support from you, I think.
Yeah, I think having that sort of infrastructure and funding and reach is something that we can bring to the table and help you out with.
Ideas, but actually, how do we do something about it outside of our school?
Yeah, and that's what we're here. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. So practically, I'm a very practical person. So practically, I think what you could do, and what those of you who are listening to this as the online session, email us. Our addresses are there. If you email us with a few ideas, some of the challenges that you've got, so is it you wanting to make contact with other schools who are interested? Then we can help you do that, put you in touch with others. Is it the funding? Then we can point you in the direction of Shine, and they will work with you on that, and we can kind of coordinate everything and then engage with you. So sort of working with you, collaborating with you, giving you that support to implement those ideas and that vision that you have for staff development at your school and improved teaching and learning with your school community. So that's a practical thing of just email us. So everybody out there, just email us, and then we will take it from there and move forward. Just before we come back and just before you ask any more questions, can I just introduce Ruth Harrison Palmer, because I'm sorry, I might have missed the fact that you joined us earlier, Ruth, and then you can just sort of say who you are and how you fit in with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally, and hello everybody who is actually here with us, and those that will be listening to the recording later as well. Yes, I'm Ruth Harrison Palmer, and I'm Director of the Institute of Education at the University of Cumbria. I'm based on our Carlisle campus and have taught in Cumbria, been in education in Cumbria for the last 30 years. Former primary school teacher, head teacher, and then moved into HE. Worked for local authority for a while as well as an English advisor for Cumbria Local Authority before coming into HE, into teacher training. But I think, you know, this is a really exciting opportunity, and it's been lovely actually just listening to Sally and Alison and Judith talk through and you sort of make this opportunity more of a reality to me, because as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking this is a fantastic opportunity. If we can secure some funding for our Cumbrian schools to engage in a research project around areas that they feel passionate about and that they know will make that positive difference to the lives of the children, families and communities in which we serve, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. So I've got even more excited about it. Just listening to everybody's discussions there, and great to hear, Nikki, your school's vision for what you want to achieve there for your early years pupils as well. Absolutely fun, and I'd love to get engaged with that. You know, let's get engaged with that, and let's look at how we can get some funding for it. And Shine is a fantastic charity. I have worked with Shine previously, and they are incredibly supportive. They're very different in terms of the approach that they take to putting in a bid for some funding, because they don't just take a hands-off approach, they actually take a really hands-on approach, and they work with you to that bid in, because they want you to be successful. So they help you to succeed, to secure the funding. As colleagues mentioned, there's been very little from Shine that's come into Cumbria, and so it's about time we got some more funding in Cumbria from Shine. They've got the money, we just need to make sure that we secure it for our schools and for our pupils in our schools. So it's really exciting. We're absolutely delighted to be in partnership with One Cumbria on this. So I think it's a really good collaboration as well to support you and others who are going to listen at a later date, to look for funding for the projects that you want to do, but then to continue working with you to develop those projects over a sustained period of time. And we know that's the best form of professional development in terms of, you know, it's a sustained form of professional development. And Alison outlined there around the skill sets that our teachers develop as part of this work as well. So there's lots of benefits to working in this way. So delighted that we've got some interest. Hope we'll get some more interest from colleagues who are listening to this, and delighted to be working in partnership with One Cumbria, with our Learning Education Development Research Centre at the university as well. So let's take it forward. Really, really excited about it.
Okay. I'm just wondering how much more we want to do in this session, because it might be better for us to meet with you, Nikki, outside this session now, and have a longer conversation with you, so that we can do that online in the first stages, and then we can actually work out what you want to achieve. We can get the funding sorted so that you've got the financial support there, and then we can all work together to make sure that the project that you want to engage in is fit for purpose, bespoke to your particular situation and context, and hopefully involves other schools in the surrounding area. So is that okay with you? Is there anything else you want to ask or comment on, you or the other Nikki?
No, that's fine. That sounds great. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think it's very exciting. That's why we're smiling so much. There's lots to take in, but it's very exciting.
Good. Okay, so hopefully that has inspired other people who are listening to this to also take part in this exciting project. So I would like to say goodbye and thank you very much for listening, and give an opportunity to my other colleagues to say any final remarks.
I'm quite sure that Alison and I would just like to say that we are also really pleased to be working with University of Cumbria, and I really hope we can get this project off the ground. I think it's got so much potential, and I'm really hoping that we'll get interest from other people, as you say, Sally, that are listening. Well, we've got this massive network of expertise and support from the university, from One Cumbria graduates, and also funding, which I know you're a practical person, Sally, and I would echo that. It's all very well having great ideas, but they have to be paid for. But everything seems to be coming together in perfect coordinated timing for once. So let's hope we can build on that and really make a difference.
Thank you. Alison?
No, I'd just echo that, and I'd just add, for people who are listening to this and they're in a school and the whole thing about research seems really scary, I'd say don't be afraid, just come and talk to us. We're real human beings, we're used to working in schools, we know all the difficulties and the challenges, but we also know just how much there is to be gained by going through this process. And it happens slowly and it happens a step at a time, and it's not scary at all. So please just get in touch, and we start with a conversation and we take it from there. But as you say, the stars are aligning in a way they've never aligned before. So, you know, if not now, when? Let's do it.
Okay, thank you. And Ruth, I think you said your piece a little bit earlier. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you very much. Do get in touch with us. Well, I'm trying to stop the recording, but I can't seem to. I think it's because Linda set it off. But what I'll do is we can edit this, and then what we'll do is we will be in touch with you, Nikki, outside of this meeting. Is there anything on a practical level that you want to ask us now, like timescales or anything like that?
Decision. How long does the project have to last? Is there a minimum time? You know, is it just until we see results or until we're satisfied? Is there a standard time that research projects last?
Yeah, in the maths project, that lasted about 18 months, but some can last 2 years. 2 years is about right, actually. I would have said, I don't know whether Alison and Judith would agree. 2 years is good because it gives you time to really set it up properly, and that does take a lot of time. And also things happen, you know, life kicks in, you know, people can't make meetings and all that kind of stuff. So 2 years is about right, but you'd be paying for a 2-year kind of like project, and if it takes a little bit longer or if you finish earlier, then that's absolutely fine. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the other time consideration is this April deadline for funding for September through SHINE. So I think a conversation sooner rather than later is probably a good idea.
And SHINE are looking for 2 or 3 year project duration. That's their kind of benchmark, but I think again it's very flexible.
Yeah. I know that down in the south we'll probably think about doing something around transition.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll be in touch with you then, Nikki.